Hello, everyone. I'm Natasha Ryan, VP of Communications for the North Group, and it is indeed time to head north. And ladies and gentlemen, it's story time. But I'm not reading you a story. It is a different kind of story time. He just rolled his eyes when he understood what I was saying here. Chris Story's on with me today. Chris, thank you for your service in the Army. I know you've been with Blackwater, Triumph, Patriot Group. Like, kind of give someone a background of all of your achievements career-wise for me here.
Well, first off, story time. I hadn't heard that one before, and as you know on the podcast, Chuck always gives an adjective, so that one's not new, but it's been a long time before I heard that since I've heard that. So thank you for that great welcome.
You are welcome.
And then also thank you for throwing me in the deep end and saying, hey, talk about your least favorite subject, which is what you've done. So let's see. So I started out in the military long time ago in a galaxy far away, and I'm not a sci-fi nerd, but that just seemed like it was appropriate.
Okay.
I spent time in the military, 14 years with a break in service. Kind of went back in after 9/11, but I got out after about 10 or 11 years, and I wanted to be an executive protection agent. So I got into executive protection, did some corporate consulting, and then after 9/11, went back in the military and did some force protection. You kind of go where the military wants you to. So I did force protection about 30 miles from my house. Did that for a while, and then decided to get into the big game and go contracting. So I spent 3.5 years in Iraq and 4.5 years in Afghanistan, working my way up from anywhere from a right rear to basically the deputy project manager for operations for the WPS program, which means I was responsible for about 900 people on the ground and 300 people in the air at any given time. Approximately 37 PSD teams, to include tactical counter assault, EP teams, low profile teams, et cetera. And then I transitioned from that and went to Afghanistan and did some low profile operations, kind of non-standard security operations for a different government agency, and then got out and went back into the corporate side of things. So I built EP programs. I worked on high net worth residential programs, been a corporate security director. So we've got a kind of a varied background in security. And just like unfortunately, just like the mafia, EP tends to, every time I get out of that, it tends to suck me back in. That and training. I don't know why, but I tend to do both of those. So the training perspective, I've trained firearms and tactics for about 20 years and focused primarily on, small unit tactics, small team tactics, whether they're urban, rural, and then primarily focused on executive protection operations. So that's me in a nutshell. Fairly broad background in events, and then now I'm a consultant. I focus on consulting and protective intelligence. Consult for Fortune 500 companies, and our protective intelligence, we focus on small to mid-market companies, folks that don't really have robust intelligence programs, and we help provide awareness of what's going on outside the perimeter. So broad experience, but that's me in a nutshell.
All useful, all helpful. That's why you're here. Yes. So I laugh because, my interactions with you, Chris, initially I'm like, this guy can be pretty stoic. I can't read this dude. And then when you sit next to someone for 8 hours at a conference, you're like, oh, we're buddies now, right? So what is something about you that would surprise someone to learn? Like some sort of soft spot or something, some hobby that maybe, what's something about you someone in the industry would go, really? What? Do you have anything like that?
I'd like to say I like to knit, but I don't. Right?
That would be funny. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be if I was like macrame or something like that. Let's see. So I think people know us a little bit more about my personal side, I think, from the podcast, right? Because the Conversation Culture Protection podcast, and I think I leak a little bit of my sense of humor on that. I have a very dry sense of humor. I think it's kind of hard to say because Chuck kind of outs me on a bunch of those things, right? Like being a book nerd or whatever.
Yeah.
I think recently I've been doing. I think that people would kind of maybe go, oh, really? I've been doing a lot of like personal growth as of late. Trying to focus on. I think we talked before the show. It's like you only have so much time, right? Or time and money, right? So just focusing on like how to make the best use of my time with family and kind of transitioning away from like me focusing on doing all the things and being the person to help working on myself to be the best, insert adjective, insert noun here that you can, and then and kind of taking it a step away and helping other people be better at whatever it is that they're doing. And I think for the most part, if people would go, yeah, I don't see him, like you said, I'm not really, I don't really look that approachable, right? I look like I'll probably choke the crap out of anybody who asks me a question, which is not the case. So I think that would be the biggest surprise, that people are like, oh no, he's approachable, So that's the secret. I am approachable. How about that? Yeah, personal growth and I am
pull up and
approachable.
say hi, and you might get a smile. How about that?
Exactly, the industry smiler, as Leon says.
I love Lee. He can bring out the best in anybody. I will say that about Lee. I love him to death. Okay, so let's jump into this. First out of the gate, you have such a defined role within the EP community. For those of you who don't know, Chris is a big part of the International Protective Security Board, the Close Protection Conference. He helps put that on every year. What is something that you want to see change over the next year in the security industry? We're going to start off with this softball question here. Like, what's something you want to see change?
That's not a softball question. I think it's a great question, because I think it puts me on the spot, right? So you mentioned IPSB. So I'm not speaking on behalf of IPSB, but I think I would be it wouldn't be very genuine if I said that my opinion that I would share here wouldn't be shared at the board, but I'm not speaking for them, if that makes sense. So I think the piece that I really want to see in the industry is us to get out of this this basic churn of, we do the lowest level possible and pat ourselves on the back for being awesome, right? I really want us to see. I want to see us have more investment in our profession. In other words, what can I do to be as good as possible, rather than the lens of the industry's awesome because I'm in it, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that we've talked about, we do a Monday night talk on what do you call it? Whatever that radio platform is. We're going to transition to LinkedIn, I think, but we do a Monday night talk, and one of the things we talk about is, how do you know, right? How do you know you're good at what you do? Because you get home safely, does that does that mean that you were good at what you did? Your principal got home safely, years and years before you showed up. So why does that make you any better, or make them any better because you're there? And the other piece that we talk is pressure tested. Are you pressure tested? Like, how do you know that you're gonna do well in this in an adverse environment, right? How do you know that your decision making is sound? And the reason that we say this, and we talked about standards before the show, is there is no standard, right? There is no pressure test. It's just you going, cool, I'm awesome, or I'm going to be a protector. Throw a couple photos up about your EDC, and then everybody thinks you're amazing, and you tell them you are, and so therefore that's the direction you're headed. I think that's the piece, is that we have to be pressure tested. We have to be we have to work at perfecting our craft, and we've got to get out of this this basic training model where that's the only, if you look in the industry, that's the only basic EP training is for the most part the only training available to protectors. After that, you're reliant on whatever you did, or something that's that you think is cool. Usually that's you dressing up as a cosplayer with your your helmet, and you're all jocked up like you're getting ready to go hit a freaking hit a bank, and that's just not how we work. So again, it's this fallacy of what we want it to be versus what it is, and us not embracing what it is and being really, really good at those basics.
So it sounds like to me that you are 100% in favor of a standard within the EP industry. So let's get into this.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Because, there are different, we talked about this. There seems to be, whether it's perceived or real, a contentious battle on who's going to create the standard and why, right? So I want to talk about this out of the gate. Where do you want to see the standards over the next 10 years? Like, what do you think needs to happen to create that standard to make sure that people are in fact good at their job?
So I think the biggest reason for the standard is a couple things: disparity in skill sets and disparity in pay. That's number one. The reason for that is because then you get disparity in delivery, right? Which is not fair to anybody involved. It's not fair to your client. It's not fair to the protector. It's not fair to the provider. And I get it. The world isn't fair, but from a business perspective, if I've got 30 years of experience conducting executive protection, doing executive protection operations, protective intelligence, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, why should I get the same rate of pay as somebody who because it's a daily rate or an hourly rate or whatever. Right. We're starting to see the transition to hourly rates, right? So there's a disparity in experience. So you walk on and immediately you're getting the same, essentially here's what the pay rate is. You can accept it or not. That's number one. Number two is the same thing from a client perspective. Why are you billing the same rate for somebody, from my experience, for somebody who just showed up on Thursday? And that has nothing to do. We all started someplace in some way, in some shape, in some form. But if you're being given the same, I'm pretty sure they don't do that with doctors, right? I'm pretty sure they don't do that almost anywhere on the planet other than the EP space, right? So again, or day laborers, right? So again, that would be one of a reason for that, is that so that we can go, what am I getting? What am I paying for? The client knows what they're paying for, because you have a standard. I used to tongue in cheek kind of align it with what is it, what was it, the Assassin's Bodyguard or whatever it was, with Ryan Reynolds and what's his name?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, whatever the name of the movie was, but
yes, I remember.
He was a AAA rated protector, right? So from him, it was a thing that was made up from him, whatever. But at the end of the day, tongue in cheek, it makes sense, right? If you have somebody who has all those skill sets, and then you only have somebody who's A rated, then why am I paying the same rate for those two people, those different disparate skill sets? So I always look at it as if you use that as a model, you have 1A, 2A, 3A, then you have a manager. If I need a protector in Florida and I have a bill rate, if I go, hey, Natasha, I need 2 level A or level 2 protectors, right? Here's what the rate is, and here's what the bill rate is. We all understand what's going on. We all understand what's needed. Now, if I'm a level 4, I can opt to do that level 2 work for that pay rate, but I understand what I'm going to get across the board, right? What do we hear in our space? What everybody leads with is what they used to do, not what they do now. Everybody goes, hey, what did you do? Where are you coming from? Well, I was a ranger. Yeah, I was a ranger like freaking 20 years ago, right? Yeah. Or I was a SEAL, or I was this. What do you do now? I'm a protector. So people kind of need need that, for whatever it is, that self-validation to say, or external validation to say, hey, you're really good at what you do, so you're a level 3. But it also helps us understand, what skills do I need at a level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. So from a professional development standpoint, you can articulate what you bring to the table, rather than, well, I used to be a SWAT cop, or I was in the Navy or the Coast Guard, or whatever the case is. So I think just bringing structure to from a standards perspective allows us across the board as an industry to articulate professional development, bill rates, pay rates, benefits, all of those things across the board. And I think having a standard will help us do that. And it'll also help us translate from state to state what your capabilities are. Now, talking about those standards, the standard will be separate from the requirement, right? We've had folks that say, hey, we're going to get the standards we're going to lobby each state to have a separate standard. That doesn't make sense. We need to have an industry standard, and then which is separate from your state legislated requirements for providing security. And that way you won't have to worry about, obviously if I need somebody in Florida, they'll meet those state requirements, but they'll also meet the standard of the people I need. I need a ninja and a cook and a whatever, and a level 2 protector, and then you're able to align those appropriately.
There are thousands of EP schools, so should we standardize the training?
So, look, at the end of the day,
stop, and you know what I mean? Like, how do we handle all of this?
So I want to. So words have meaning, right? So I would say there's a difference between standardization, which means everything is the same, and standards, which means a measurement of performance, right? So, so the EP school is not like, nobody's going to do EP suddenly backwards, and then it's going to be like some revolutionary change, right? EP schools are focused on models, and that part of that model is to put butts in seats, right? Which is why you do the 3-car motorcade or 4-car motorcade. So it keeps everybody involved. But the likelihood of you rolling a 4-car motorcade is very low, unless you're two-car motorcades with 2 principals together. You need to figure it out. So really you need to understand, what we need to understand from a school perspective is, what do I need to know as a basic function to do my job? And then how do I deliver that? And that's the difference in schools. I've been an instructor for some of the top schools in the nation, develop programs for governments and, corporate entities. Nobody's going to teach EP the basics any differently. It's delivery, and then it's reps in execution, and then what are you being taught that's valid for now? If you go to an EP school and they're teaching a 3-car motorcade, I'm not sure. I don't know of anybody who's doing a 3-car motorcade. It doesn't mean you don't need to know it, but if they're doing that all the time, you need to be able to understand that you're probably not going to see that. So again, they don't need to be standardized. My thought process would be, if I'm going to a school and they have a standard, again, we laughed about this. A Simpsons episode was, hey, your check passed. Congratulations, you're a bodyguard, or your check cleared, right? So we should have there should be a written test, right? There should be a performance-based test, and you should get graded on that and get feedback. That would say, hey, we've met a certain standard. Standardization would be, we've got standard language that we use so that we all understand what we're talking about. Is it a chase? Is it a follow? Is it a freaking trail? What is it, and what do those mean? It doesn't mean that we can't have different labels for different tools, but we should also have an understanding of what they all mean, right? What you might hear. So that model might look like, I go to EP school A, and at the end they have a standards test that said, do you want to take the standard, or you want to take the test that says, hey, this is delivered by this body, and then you get that certification that said, I met this standard, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Some schools do it right now where you meet the regulation. I think it's for the Virginia DCJS, is that when you take their test, that test is equivalent to that regulation, which allows you to work as a guard in that state. And so that test is twofold, which is why people say the DCJS standard. I think that's in Virginia. Does that make sense?
Yes, but walk me through this, because as we all know, like, my background's in TV news, not security. So walk me through this. So the standard gets written, people meet this standard. How is that going to affect business, right? Is this standard now going to be the bar setter for, bar setter for a client, and they're not going to hire an EP agent unless they've met this standard? Is that how you envision this going forward?
Well, no.
Okay.
Because it has to be, it has to be accepted, right? So you bring up a great point, is that the most important part to all of this is the customer, right? Like the most
Yes.
important part, because you can just create
100%.
Chris's standard of awesomeness, and if nobody recognizes it, or nobody recognizes that there's a difference in that than anything else, then it's worthless, right? So when somebody says you're a certified protective agent, great, certified by who, right? Because like Steve, like who's Steve? I don't even know who that guy is, right? So it doesn't matter, right? So where it really matters is if the standard is recognized by the customer. So if the customer says, here are our requirements, this is what we need now, and this is what we're looking for in the future, and then we can train to that standard, right? And then the training schools, of the, hundreds of them in the space, they say, okay, great, we're training you to this standard that's supported by the client. Well, now as a provider, I can say, hey, Mr. Client, all of our people meet this standard, right? Which means here's how they're trained, which means our, level 1, level 2, level 3, this is what they know. So instead of me selling you 10, people at X, I'm going to sell you 5 at this lower rate, 3 at this higher rate, and 1 and 2 at this, never do math in public, 2 at this much higher rate, which gives you much better value for what you're getting, right? Or what you would be paying for, right? At what you need. But the customer has to be able to understand the difference in that, and the customer has to be able to understand what that variation is. Otherwise, the standard won't mean anything to anybody but us.
And talking about authoring the standards, for those of you who are not aware of this, like there's been some, as we kind of brought up early, there's been some little bit of a argument over who should write the standard, right? So we have the ANSI standard that the BEPP, the Board of Executive Protection Professionals, is writing, and then we have a standard that ASIS is writing. How do you view the difference in those, and should we be collaborative? Chris Story.
Yes. So I think there's this thought process in the space that so you've got a couple different bodies, right? You've got CPLC, which represents the clients, right? That's a corporate executive protection leadership, or leaders, whatever. And then you've got the IPSB, International Protective Security Board. Then you've got the BEP squared, like you just talked about. Then you've got as is and the as is EP community. Each of them have a different piece, or as Chuck would say, slice of the pie, and they represent a different entity, right? So CPLC represents customer, IPSB represents international protectors, BEP squared is focusing on American, or an American standard, right? As is focusing on the individual standard. So collectively, they're working together. And I think that the only thing thus far, because BEP squared is fairly new, is those other entities all have cross representation, right? So there's people that are on different working groups that are saying, hey, well, this is what these people are doing over here. Let's make sure we're aligned. So it is working together. It's not siloed. It's not competitive. It's not contentious in any way. Everybody wants the industries to be successful. We just have different lenses of how we approach those things. And I think that was that piece in the how, from a training perspective, is, how matters, right? So some people will teach you what to do at the basic EP level, and then once you move on, you should be taught how to think, because you're going to apply what to think to that how in that context. So across the board is, how do we get that standard applied? What does that look like, and how do we adopt it? I think one of the biggest pieces of contention has always been for people is, who are you to tell me what my standard should be, right? Which is the truth, right? Like,
it's a fair question. Like,
everybody says that, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
So when we look at it being collective, and you look at the standards, anybody who's involved is listed in that authoring, and then there's a like a peer group and peer body that reviews it to say, hey, what does this look like? It's not just Chris. It's not just world according to Chris and Natasha, and everybody else can suck it. It's there's a lot of work and working groups that go into this. Sure. I think that one of the things that having those diverse looks makes sense with is, and I think collectively we should all look at it together and have a representation of everybody. But each of these bodies has their own lens and their own view and their own culture, right? So that's why when you share it cross culture, you get a different perspective. And I think as we work together to define the standard, because everybody's on the same page, everybody says, yes, we need a standard. The sticking point is, what does it look like, and who's going to be the people that drive that? Well, like I said, the customer has to be involved because they're the ones that receive it. And to be quite frank, most customers aren't educated on what EP does or is, right? Everybody goes, yeah, I know what you do. It's exactly like the Secret Service. And the people in the Secret Service go, yep, absolutely right. And then people in the commercial space go, absolutely not, because we don't have all those assets and resources. So again, if we have those disagreements and lenses, bringing those to the table and saying, look, what does a commercial standard look like versus what is the standard that that most schools use now, which was derived from either Department of State or Secret Service. So it's an exciting space. It's an exciting time. It can seem contentious because of, people have views of what right looks like. I think I think the end result will be helpful. I think as we look at those entry level folks, they're like, cool, what do I need to know? So it doesn't really impact them, right? People who are mid-level are like, hey, what do I need to know? There's something missing. The people that coming in maybe don't know what I need them to know, and I want to know more as I move further in my career, right? And then there's those of us who are on the other end where, you're kind of like, okay, I'm in a leadership position now. How do we help people get to where they need to be? But the ego, I don't want to be challenged to a standard. I've been here. I shouldn't have to be held to a standard because I'm me. Well, those of us that are in that are going to be pushed out to pasture. You'll be graduated, or somebody will give you a grandfather or whatever. Like, look, you're not running, you're not standing post, so you don't have to meet that. You should meet a management requirement and have an fundamental knowledge of the industry, but you probably don't have to meet that standard because you're not in that role. And I think that's where there's a lot of friction. People are like, well, what if I can't meet it? And that's what they're worried about. I would say, let's look at what it comes out to be. Nobody's going to say you need to bench, 600 pounds and squat, 800 or whatever the case is. It's going to be, we all fear the unknown, and we fear that some guy's or gal's going to make us do something we don't want to do. I think that everything that I've seen thus far is extremely reasonable. It gets us all to a better place, and it holds us accountable to the profession that we love.
And when you say what you've seen so far, so full disclosure, right? Like, I was the vice chair of the Puget Sound chapter for ASIS here in the Seattle area. I helped MC the IPSB conference, and now I'm helping out with BEPP. So I've had exposure to every industry organization in this, like, kind of almost every one of them, right? And I can collectively see good from each organization, and you only know what you know. So I know the BEPP has 180 plus people working on those standards. Help paint the picture of what it looks like in the other organizations. Who's coming to the table? Who's writing those standards?
Well, Chat GTP, actually. No, I'm kidding. The look on your face was, what? Yeah, see, smarter, not harder. No. So, ASIS has an EP community that's been working on it, and I think it's actually in conjunction with University of Nebraska. They're working on that. IPSB is a part of that. I think CEPLC representatives are a part of that. Right. So you've got people that hold different hats and have to look at it from a different lens from the organizations that they represent. But there's a lot of folks in the community that are putting things, together. So the university kind of sets the framework, if that makes sense. Say, hey, this is what you need to be able to execute it, and it's supported by educational institution. And then you're supported also by those other institutions. So from what I recall, I don't represent ASIS, but we've been on panels and boards and et cetera with them, is that, again, they're focused on the individual center. So what does the individual need to know from a requirement standpoint for this role? In other words, for you to be a level 1 protector, what do you need to know, right? What do you, like Chuck would say, be, no, do. What do you need to be? What do you need to know? And what do you need to do? Great example. And then from there, it doesn't tell you how to do it. It tells you what you need to do in that role, if that makes sense. So what you see is like, from example, you said 180 contributors from BEP squared. I think there were probably 60 or 70 from some of the other places, in each of the other groups. They put their, you task people to do different roles and guidance, and then you go through and you go, okay, great, this is written from a different perspective, like even perspective like first person versus second person versus third person. So how do we get one language out of this? And then it goes through multiple reviews to go, what did we miss? Is this too biased? Is it too high level or too low level? And then you go from there.
And I know that, like, I'm such a big fan of groupthink. I encourage that, right, in my position, in my leadership role with, like, I love to hear everyone's perspectives because I think it just lends to a better product in the end, right? So do you feel there's enough cross-pollinating, if you will, between the groups writing the standards? Like, are you someone that's on the side of like IPSB interacting with ASIS? Are you then going to BEPP and contribute on that? Is anyone from BEP coming to ASIS and contributing over there? Like, are we cross-pollinating? Are we keeping it pretty separate right now?
No, I think I think as people, so first off, I think it's early days to, because all of those different entities are working on a different not portion of the standard, but a different alignment, right? So an individual standard that feeds to a industry standard that feeds into an international standard, if that makes sense. Okay. So everybody's kind of coming up with their foundations of what that looks like. At some point, they don't have to cross-pollinate, but they should. And so I would say challenge the groupthink thought to, because groupthink is used. I know what you're saying. You're saying is like, how do we use the collective, right? Collaborative
it's
approach.
It's for the greater good that we all talk about everything and come to some sort of like agreed standard, right?
So we're there, I think, in most of the organizations because there's been a foundation, right? BEP squared is fairly new, and they've kind of put their stake in the sand on ANSI, and nobody really knows what that looks like as of yet. So once they have like a draft or something that they're willing to share and say, okay, great, here's where we're going, here's what that looks like. What do you guys think about it? I think that's a sticking point, because I think the other three organizations have kind of done so, at least, unofficially, like there's MOUs between the organizations, right? Because they're separate entities. So right. And they're established entities, so they can't just go like, yeah, cool. If somebody speaks on behalf of that and they give an approval, then that organization is approving that. So again, there's agreements that have to be, discussed between the bodies, and then there's got to be, understanding, and then at the end of the day, everybody wants to move forward, but these bodies have to work together in order to all be successful. And I think they all want to retain their identities as well, right? Which is why everybody's kind of focusing on those different areas. So look, at the end of the day, I don't think they're going to be that far off, right? Unless, like, hey, you went left and you should have gone right to the standard. At the end of the day, the standard says, how do we measure our performance, right? It shouldn't be there to disparage somebody. It should be there as a guideline for performance for us to measure ourselves against. And now it's going to be less subjective, when you're getting a review. Because right now it's unfortunately, it's the blind leading the blind, right? People think that law enforcement equals security, and it doesn't. So you can get a guy that was a police chief or whatever, or a detective or lieutenant, whatever, and him be your corporate security director, and he has no idea what EP is about, or has no idea really what security is about. But the person who hired him equated law enforcement to security, right? So either he's going to do one of two things, he or she's going to do one of two things. They're going to go, hey, I have no idea what's going on. Can you guys make me smart, and can you help me get up to speed and tell me what you do? Because I don't know how to tell. I don't know how to tell if you know what you're doing or not, right?
Yeah.
Or they can do like we see a lot is, I'm just going to make this place like the last place it was, and they hire a bunch of former law enforcement. Then it just becomes a private law enforcement, entity, right? And that's what we see a lot in the space, because our comfort zone is where we've been and what we've done. lack of comfort is, if I don't know what's going on, I can't control it, I'm going to look bad. So I think that overall the standard is going to be very positive. It's going to help educate people on what they're getting, what they're paying for, and more importantly, the value that protectors bring to the table. And it's going to help with professional development. What do I do? Not only it'll help if you get the level 1 standard, whatever that is, I'm just arbitrary.
Yeah.
You'll be able to articulate what you do to other people. You'll be here's a list of things that I do, and here's what I did, and here's who I did it for. Right? That's valuable. Right now, nobody knows what to say. I protected J-Lo or whatever. Right? Like, what does that even mean? So it's an exciting time. I think people are looking forward to it. Again, usually the detractors are, who are you to tell me what I should be doing? And then the other piece is those who fear that they won't be able to make the standard. But it's not going to be a low ball. I think it's going to be challenging. I'm looking forward to testing myself against it, and I think it'll be excellent for the industry moving forward.
Listen, challenge, growth, that's all part of it, right? That's how we make ourselves better, the industry better. And I love that you're fully on board, as I think most people are, to collaborate. Like, I love hearing that the organizations are open. And I think, if everyone could get those docs in place and start collectively thinking, I think it would get done a lot faster. So I love that. Bring it to Chris Story, everyone. Bring all of your ideas to Chris Story.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think people think it's contentious, and it's really not. I think, look, everybody wants us to get to a better place, and some people are frustrated at how that looks like or what that looks like. I think once we get rid of the, look, we're gonna get to a better place, which will cause us bigger problems, right? Because that's how it works, right? You deal with more mature problems once you've become more mature. So once we get there, then we'll come up with other things to deal with. And I think we just have to get through this. We've got to learn to trust each other's judgment. We also have to learn to understand perspective. Like, I think the thing that I bring a lot of value in is that I've had a very diverse background in most, if not all, of the segments of executive protection, right? I've consulted on House of Worship. I haven't worked with a celebrity, but I've done celebrity events. I've done corporate. I've done PSD. I've built government programs and training, right? So I think one of the things that is excellent about each of these entities is that it takes away the positional authority, and it just gives somebody's contribution from a perspective, right? You have a external thought process, right? You're in the industry, but you're not a practitioner. If you review it and you give an overview, you can ask questions that nobody else is gonna ask, because they don't look at it through that lens. So I think once we get past that phase and we really look at it and go, great, you're a subject matter expert in this piece, but it doesn't apply to corporate, or it doesn't apply to government. It doesn't. How do we find that middle area that applies across the board, and then we adopt that and accept it, boom, and then we move on, right? Because it gets us to a better place. So that part's going to be exciting, and it's going to be exciting to have people like you who are in the industry, but aren't the people that are working in it, right? Like as a protector, for you to give your perspective and go, that doesn't make any sense to me, or I don't understand that, or yes, that actually does make sense, and I know why you're doing it. Yeah.
And I promise to ask a lot of questions if anyone else.
I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will.
Yeah. All right. So let's switch topics here, because we all know the illustrious social media platforms and the dangers that can correlate. And I'm just curious what you think about, EP agents posting on social media with their headshots and client-based work. Like, where is the line? Where should it not be crossed?
Yeah, that's a hard one, because people want to be, social media is an outlet, right? If you don't have a presence, the thought process is that you don't really exist at times. Yeah. However, the chosen role in our profession is discretion. That's a part of it, right? So we have to be discreet at what we do. And if you know, Elijah Shaw, I thought he did a really, really good job, because when he was posting all of his things with Usher, he had his client's permission, and it was that was okay, right? In this case, it's that vague booking where you're like, just finished up a job, can't tell you where I'm at, but then you freaking highlight whatever it is with some celebrities behind you, right? That's not helpful, right?
Right.
So it's got to be tasteful. It should be after the fact, and you should have your client's permission if you're doing that. The other thing is like, do I really give two shits if you're on a freaking private aircraft? You know, I don't, right? You do, which is a thing, because here's the deal. I know you're not paying for it, so who cares?
Right.
You know, like if you're paying for it, then I'm going to be impressed. But at the end of the day, you're no different than the luggage, right? You're just a required accessory. Nobody said, I got to have you. They said, I got to have a guy or a gal, and this is where we're going. So if you're on the tour bus, like Eric Utch tends to be at times, that's cool, because he's like, I'm on a bus, you know, which is awesome, right? But again, it's that ego piece, right? And so we've really got to be careful, because first off, you know, hiring managers are looking at that as well. Like, are you going to be discreet with my client? You know, are you going to be discreet when we go? You know, how do you manage your social media? You know, I think that's a consideration. So I think it'd be done tastefully. I think it could be done well. I think it could be done without you highlighting your principal or where you're at. I think that you can do all of those things. I just think that when you cross the line into either principal assets, you know, tail numbers, even some of the, you know, just the planes and all that stupid shit, it just gets old. And it's like, okay, let's grow up and let's move on. You know, I know it's new to you and that's cute, but you know, we've all been there and done that. Let's move on. It's the same thing with went to the range and they're all jocked up looking like they're getting ready to freaking hit a crack house. That's not the job. If you want to impress me, show up to the range in a sport coat, right? An old sport coat, and train how you're going to that you're expecting to fight within your role. I don't have any issues with somebody expanding that or learning to do anything at night or under nods or whatever, right? But if that's all you show and that's all you do, you're just playing Walter Mitty, from my perspective.
Chris,
and if you don't know who Walter Mitty is, look it up.
Thank you. It has been my pleasure you coming on Time to Head North. I appreciate your candor, just throwing it out there, being honest. And I look forward to more conversations. Tell people how they can watch your podcast, or listen, I should say.
Well, first off, I want to thank you very much for having me on. I enjoy the conversation, and I'm honored to be a guest. I know you guys are doing great things up there, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's see. The easiest place to find us is on what is it? Apple, iTunes, and Conversation Close Protection. Chuck Randolph and I, we've been trying to try to do it like 4 times a month, but we've been slacking as of late. But we got some fantastic guests on there. It's not about us; it's about the guests, and it really just highlights the fantastic people that are in the industry and that we're lucky to be. And a lot of them are unknown, right? But we're just lucky to be able to talk to them and about what they do. And then I'm easily found on LinkedIn and any other place that you just look for Chris Story. But you can't look for Story Time because that's somebody else has that.
Dang it, that would have been good. I like that.
Yeah.
Every time we talk, that's now the thing. I'm going to be like, it's story time, and you're going to get so annoyed.
And I'm going to be like, ugh.
The roll of the eyes. Okay, well, listen, thank you so much. I love your podcast. I've had the honor of being a guest on it and just enjoy both of you and Chuck. So if you want to hear more of our podcast, Time to Head North, visit our website, tngdefense.com. Check out iTunes, Spotify, or Podbean. And until next time, thanks to all of you for listening, maybe watching. And again, thanks to Chris for being a guest. So have a wonderful day and go out there and do good. Thanks, everyone.